We're going to look into errors and omissions, the foreign exchange market. We have a third element in the balance of payment, a very interesting topic and a very important area. The foreign exchange market has got its own rules and regulations, has automatically rupee will try to show its reaction against that particular currency. What is the supply of foreign exchange all about? Good morning and welcome to the last session, session 3 of Open Economic, chapter 12. This chapter, we are going to look into a lot of topics which are very interesting and they have a lot of deep meaning in terms of understanding the macroeconomic activities that happen across a country. So quickly getting into what are the topics that we are going to look into. The topics are, we're going to look into errors and omissions, the foreign exchange market, foreign exchange rate, demand for foreign exchange. We are going to look into for the supply of foreign exchange, determination of exchange rate, interest rate and the exchange rate, and we are also going to look into the income and the exchange rate. What is an exchange rate in terms of the long run, fixed exchange rate, merits and demerits of the flexible as well as the fixed exchange rate, managed floating, gold standard, and not to forget the Bretton Woods system. Now, if you look into the session, there are quite a number of topics that we need to cover. All these topics are small yet very important and they mean a lot when it comes to the open economy altogether. So not wasting much of your time, let's move forward. Errors and omissions. What are the errors and omissions that normally happen in terms of the open economy altogether? Now, if you look here, it is difficult to record all the transactions, especially the international transactions, accurately. Why? What is the problem in that? Many times there are people who will try to understand the factor that they might have done some transaction, they might have done to do some international transaction from country to country, but then there might be slight amount of a miss because I might have not recorded each and every dollar or each and every rupee clearly. So there might be sometimes some omissions that can happen in international transactions. Next, we sometimes tend to do mistakes which is a human error altogether. So there might be a possibility where you will see that there are some miscalculations, there are some factors which might have been missed out in the international trade arena altogether. So we have a third element in the balance of payment apart from the current and capital which will reflect this error and omission. We are not just going to leave it away, but we are going to keep in mind where we are going to make a mark of all these errors and omissions that are going to be missed out on the international trade. So this is something that we cannot just afford to give a long hand look, but this is something that we will keep in our mind. We will record those transactions and we will let it know after some point of time, and that's where we maintain a separate book called for the errors and omissions. Now moving forward, the foreign exchange market, a very interesting topic and a very important area when it comes to the international economics, the open economy altogether. Now, if you start understanding the foreign exchange market, it is basically the market at which a currency is traded versus the other currency. Now, most common example is how do you trade rupee versus dollar? That's where we basically start this entire exercise all about. So the market in which national currencies are traded for one another is known as the foreign exchange market. Are trader for one another. This word is very important. So when I'm going to trade rupee versus dollar, I'm getting into the foreign exchange market. Now, what is the major advantage of foreign exchange market? Because I am involved in open economy, because I am involved in international trade. So for me, it is mandatory that I start getting into the foreign exchange. I need money. I need international currency when I'm trading across the borders. So who are the suppliers of this foreign exchange? The major participants in any of the foreign exchange market are the banks, the commercial banks, the foreign exchange brokers, the organized institutional brokers, and the people who are authorized by the RBI who can handle the foreign exchange altogether. So foreign exchange market has got a lot of rules and regulations. It cannot be given to everybody just like that. So the foreign exchange market is being built upon such a framework that only certain people can go ahead and involve themselves. But if you want to trade as a country, there are banks, there are specialized institutions who have the license to provide you the necessary foreign exchange in order to promote the economy altogether. But on the whole, foreign exchange promotes a larger part of the financial transaction of the business and trade in the open economy. So moving forward. Now, the foreign exchange rate. Who decides the rate of dollar every day? Who decides the rate of pound or yen or euro or any other foreign currency for that matter? The foreign exchange market has got its own rules and regulations, has got its own standards in terms of setting up a factor, a market altogether. So let's try to understand the foreign exchange rate altogether. Foreign exchange rate is the price of one currency in terms of dollar. So when I'm going to take dollar versus rupee altogether, I have an issue that has to be addressed. Now, how is this rupee versus dollar is going to be addressed? If I say 1 rupee is equal to 75 in terms of dollar. Now, $1 is equal to one factor in terms of understanding the value. Now, who fixes this rate altogether? It is actually the market that fixes the rate based on the supply and demand. That's why we say it links different currencies of the nature and enables a comparison of international cost and prices. So there are a lot of factors that will get involved in the dollar, in the foreign exchange market altogether. So all these factors will constitute in order to determine the price of a particular currency. For example, we have to pay 75 for $1, then the exchange rate is kept as 75 per dollar. Now that 75 will be decided on the spot based on the supply and demand of the currency altogether. So you need to understand what is the demand for dollar today, what is the demand for euro today, what is the demand for pound today. Based on that factor only, you will be able to decide the price of that currency versus the domestic currency. So it is very, very important when you get into the foreign exchange market to understand in what denomination, what setup the market is trying to decide the rate of a particular currency. Moving forward. Demand for foreign exchange. How do you see the demand for foreign exchange? Every day when you read the newspaper, you will be surprised to see that there are many factors on which the demand is being decided. Today it might be dollar, tomorrow it might be euro, day after tomorrow it might be on yen, it might be on pound. We do not know which currency is getting highlighted in the international market altogether. So the demand for foreign exchange starts from this. They want to purchase good. Who wants to purchase the good? The people want to purchase the good. So that's a very, very important factor. Since people are involved in trade, they want the services from other country. They want goods from other country. There is a factor called as demand that starts getting set up there. So the demand function will start getting in and will try to set up the factor of how it is being arbitrated altogether. Now they want to send gifts abroad. Now that is another factor. Why? Because people try to exchange goods. People try to send goods from one country to another country. So automatically they want to send gifts abroad. So that is also another predominant factor that happens here. Similarly, they want to purchase financial assets in certain countries. So again, when I want to buy some financial assets, I want to buy a house in Dubai, I want to buy a house in Singapore, I want to buy a land in America. So now what happens here is that there is some financial transaction in terms of buying an asset. So again, a demand is created in the market. A rise in price in foreign exchange will increase the cost, which means to say in terms of rupees, moment the demand goes up of purchasing that foreign good. So the demand for that particular currency is going up, automatically the rupee will start trying to fight or compete against that international currency. More the demand, more the fluctuation, more the necessity that has been created for that particular currency, automatically rupee will try to show its reaction against that particular currency. So that is why when a currency comes under pressure, when a currency comes under some sort of demand or some fluctuation, you will see the foreign exchange market reacting to it very clearly. During the time of Brexit, just to give you an example, the pound value stumbled down. Why? Because there was a pressure that was created on the pound, on the UK market, saying that the country United Kingdom wanted to move away from the European Union. Automatically there was a heavy hit, a pressure on the currency. The pound started coming down, the rupee started gaining against the pound. That's where you see that moment a demand goes up or the demand slides down, there will be an immediate fluctuation on the foreign exchange rate altogether. So moving forward, supply of foreign exchange. What is the supply of foreign exchange all about? Now, if you start looking here, foreign currency flows into the home country due to the following reason. What is the reasons? Exports by a country. The first thing is exports. Moment you start seeing exports happening from one country to another country, India exporting goods like agricultural goods, chemical goods, or it might be pharmaceutical goods, or it might be IT services, whatever kinds of goods and services that a country exports from its land to any other foreign country, automatically a demand fluctuation is created. Foreign exchange will start moving into that country. Now, foreigners send gift or transfers. Suppose there is a money transfer happening by any person who is living abroad to the domestic nation. Let's say that some of your relations who are staying in abroad are sending money to you. Automatically there will be a foreign exchange transfer. There are also chances when the people start sending gifts from foreign country to our country. So that is another way where you will see the foreign exchange flowing from the other country to our place. The assets of the home country are bought by foreigners. This is also a very, very important reason. As we inspire, as we expect that we would try to buy a land in UK, or we would try to buy a house in Dubai, or we would try to buy an apartment in Singapore, there might be foreigners who are also interested in buying or purchasing assets in India. So automatically now what happens? There is a flow of foreign exchange or money that comes inside. So when you see here, the three primary reasons are exports, transfer of money, and purchasing of assets. All these reasons lead to the supply of foreign exchange in a country. So the supply and demand factors are very, very interesting factor when it comes to the foreign exchange. It is not that they are just simply floating or they are just available like that. It is because of the factor that there are some transactions which keep on happening across this globe every moment, at every single point of time, which makes the foreign exchange keep moving across this country like a buzzword. Now, moment when you start looking into the travel and tourism sector itself, that is where primarily the foreign exchange plays a greater role, because people tend to travel from one country to another country. There is always a need for foreign exchange. So at any given point of time in the open economy, there will be a demand for foreign exchange. exchange, 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 Now, flexible exchange rate, and we are also going to talk about speculation. So how are we going to talk and understand about the exchange rate? Who determines the exchange rate altogether? So there are certain methods in which the exchange rate of a currency is determined. So let's first try to understand the flexible exchange rate. This flexible exchange rate is determined by the market forces of demand and supply, and it is also known as floating exchange rate. As I have told you in my previous session and also on the previous slides, that there is always a factor of demand and supply that plays across the foreign exchange market. It automatically leads to the fluctuation of the currency at different levels, at different factors altogether. So that is why I say that as flexible exchange rate or a floating exchange rate, which means that will keep changing according to the need of the market, that will keep changing according to the dimensions of the market. So it is very, very important that we try to understand the flexible exchange rate system altogether. So tomorrow, if the market is not showing a demand for dollar, automatically the dollar rate will fluctuate against the Indian rupee. So this flexible exchange rate system is something that would not be kept constant, and it will keep moving according to the market. The second factor, speculation. This is something where you would always see that people get an intuition. People always tend to speculate. People intend to gamble. People intend to put in their intuitions in terms of understanding that there is something that's going to happen in the foreign exchange market. Why? Because they want to make some gains. They believe that certain news, certain factors can make the foreign exchange market to move. They can believe that the foreign currency will gain after some time, so I'll hold the currency for some time. I want to sell the currency right now because there might be some war-like situation that can get created. So all kind of speculation, all kind of rumors, all kind of thought process, opinions, ideas can create a very important fluctuation in the foreign exchange market. So it's very important that every single piece of information upon which the foreign exchange market enacts will try to create a rift or will try to create a factor altogether. So that's why it is very, very important that we try to understand how the exchange rate is determined. Moving forward, now interest rate and the exchange rate. Now this is also very, very important. Why? Because in the short run, another factor that is important in determining the exchange rate movement is the interest rate differential. At what interest rate are we determining all about? The difference between interest rates of the countries. What is the interest rate at which it has been lent, it has been borrowed? So even that differential interest rate system will definitely make an impact on the foreign exchange market. There are a lot of funds, there are huge funds which are owned by banks, multinational corporations, wealthy individuals, NRIs and people who will try to make the maximum movement in terms of interest rate. So the borrowing, the lending, or you are trying to speculate with the money, you are trying to provide the currency at a higher rate or at a lower rate, will try to have an impact on the exchange rate system. That is why, for example, when India tries to borrow money from a country, it is very, very sure at what rate we are going to buy the foreign exchange altogether. We are not interested in buying foreign exchange at a very high rate, neither at a very low rate. We want to maintain a balance so that always the rupee is able to maintain its stance against any other foreign exchange in this world. Moving forward, income and the exchange rate. This is very, very important. What is income and how the exchange rate matters with that? When income increases, consumer will try to spend. This is a very, very known and a common factor. We have seen in microeconomics, and we have also tried to understand the basic reason for the growth of economy is consumption. Consumption happens when income is on the higher side. So moment the income increases, the consumer will try to increase his spending. Now spending on imported goods is also likely to increase. Now this is an important word which you need to understand, which we need to stress upon also. Now if I have money where I can go and buy imported cars, imported clothes, imported electronic items, automatically what is happening is that I am throwing my excess of money into foreign goods, because of which there will be a fluctuation in the exchange rate altogether. So when the imports increase, the demand curve for foreign exchange will shift right. So automatically a demand curve like this will start increasing and go up the range. So if this is the demand curve initially, because of increase in income, the demand curve will shift automatically to the position D1. Why is this happening? Because income is increasing, spending is also increasing, so the demand for foreign exchange will also increase. There is a depreciation of the domestic currency. The third factor. Now what is happening is that because I am interested in foreign goods, because I am interested in goods that are made in abroad, I am not interested in my local goods, the domestic currency value will start coming down. Why? Because now the demand for dollar is more higher when compared to rupee. So automatically I will tend to spend more money for the foreign goods rather than spending on the local goods. So that is why we need to understand that depreciation of local currency is bound to happen at any given point of time. Moving forward, exchange rates in the long run. What happens to the exchange rate in the long run? Now the purchasing power theory is used to make a long run prediction about the exchange rate in a flexible exchange system. Why? Because you need to understand what is the capacity for the country in order to see the purchasing factor for a foreign exchange. Now in the long run, the income, the capacity to buy foreign goods also matters a lot in terms of determining the foreign exchange rate. So if the country starts showing an increasing purchasing power capacity, so in the long run the demand curve will keep on moving forward. So that is where it matters a lot in terms of understanding it. According to this theory, as a long factor, when you start going, there are no barriers like tariffs or no quotas or any kind of factors coming into it. Automatically in the long run, there would be a push altogether. But if there are any taxes, if there are any quotas, if there are any restriction, the long run, the demand will start coming downwards. Next, exchange rate should be eventually adjusted on the same product, because whether you measure the product in India or in dollars or in Japan using yen, except the difference factor of the transportation not to be included, almost the price will be the same. Now what I am trying to tell here is that whether you buy the product in India or you buy the product in US or you buy the product in Japan, what happens here is that eventually the product, the price of the product will tend to remain the same when you try to equate. But what matters a lot, when the product moves from one country to another country, automatically there is a transportation cost, there are some kinds of tax, there are some kinds of indirect factors that add on to the value of the product, and the product becomes pricier altogether. So it is very, very important for all of us to understand the transportation factor, excluding it against the interest rate, the income factors, the purchasing power factor will make a difference in terms of the foreign exchange rate. So moving forward, Now, the fixed exchange rate system. Now, before I try to understand the fixed exchange rate system, try to make you understand how it exactly works in the economy, let's have a quite close look into the simple graph. If you look into this graph, there is a point, a center point, where the demand curve and the supply curve will tend to meet. Now, this point is the equilibrium point, and this would determine the market price of that particular product. So how do we really try to understand the fixed exchange rate system? Now, when you start trying to understand the fixed exchange rate system, which means the government will now intervene and they will set the exchange rate at a particular level. They will not allow flexibility or floating. Now, government is fixing the price. They are telling that at a particular level only this currency can be traded. So automatically it is fixed. You cannot change the price. Second, in a fixed exchange rate system, when government action tries to increase the exchange rate, thereby trying to make the domestic currency cheaper, we call it as devaluation. It has happened many times in China. It has happened in many other countries altogether. Why? Because when that country is trying to devaluate its own currency by increasing the foreign currency against, then what happens is that the native currency or the homeland currency will start falling down against the foreign currency. On the other hand, when you do a revaluation, that means the government is trying to increase the exchange rate of the domestic currency against the foreign currency. Now, what will happen is that the home currency value will start going up at a higher rate altogether, and the foreign exchange currency or the value will start coming down. So that is where you will see that there is a flexibility in terms of the exchange when it happens in valuation and devaluation. In revaluation, what happens? Currency will be fixed. That is, government will try to increase the domestic currency value. In devaluation, currency will be reduced. That is, government will reduce the value of the home currency versus that of dollar or any other foreign exchange. Now, moving forward, merits and demerits of flexible and the fixed exchange rate systems altogether. Now, if you try to understand here, there are many factors that would be interesting enough for us to understand what are the merits, what are the demerits that starts involving in the foreign exchange system. Now, the main feature of a fixed exchange rate system is that there must be credibility in the government. So, if the government is shaky, the government's credibility is not very high, the government keeps changing too much, the policies are not up to the mark, the open economic system is not supporting, then automatically what happens to the international trade arena is that they will try to have a doubt on the government, on the system itself. So that will make the fixed exchange rate system to come down. There will be a question mark on that. Whereas when you go on the flexible exchange rate system, this gives the government more flexibility because it's purely dependent on the market factors, the supply and demand factor. So automatically there will not be much of impulse altogether. So there will be a movement. Of course, the movement is very much understandable because the market is creating the movement. Government is not trying to block anybody. So the major advantage here is that when the movement is automatically set in, the rhythm is set, the pace is set altogether, then you don't have to worry. The government doesn't have to intervene. The market will not come under pressure. Rather, the market will try to promote open economy more, and the exchange rate system can be more transparent, and it will be advantageous for the entire economic growth altogether. Now, moving forward, manage floating rate. This is a mixture where I would like to talk about. This is a new kind of system. It's a mixture of flexible exchange rate and a fixed exchange rate. Under this system, what we are trying to do here is that central banks will intervene to buy and sell the foreign exchange in order to moderate the exchange. Now, for example, RBI senses that there is some problem with our exchange rate, that rupee is not not moving against dollar. There are some problems that are happening. So now what RBI will tend to do is that RBI will come in and they will start setting up the exchange rate system by which they will buy in or they will sell some foreign exchange, and when they feel that this action is appropriate enough, why? Because this will help to set the foreign exchange rate altogether, RBI will always start bringing in an intervention factor. But this is not suggested. Why? Because if every time a central bank will step into the foreign exchange, automatically the domestic value currency will start falling down. And people will start doubting whether the local system has got weightage, whether the currency itself has got weightage in the international market altogether. So it is very, very important to see that the managed floating rate as far as possible is kept at bay. Let us not try to bring in the managed floating rate every time. Only when the RBI thinks that it is needed, the actions are needed, are appropriate, we will bring in the managed floating rate, or else this will not be a prescribed method every time in the open economy. Moving forward, the gold standard. This is a standard that was followed some time back. Why? Because the standard is primarily trying to understand the value of gold versus the foreign exchange. So all the currencies were defined in terms of gold. They were not defined in any other metal, only in terms of gold, and the value of gold was considered to be benchmarked against that particular currency. Each participant country, which means every country who is participating in the foreign exchange, will be committed to guarantee and the free convertibility of its currency into gold. So any point of time, the country has to give a guarantee saying that to the value of gold, I am allowing the free convertibility of my currency, which means I will exchange my currency equal to the value of gold. This meant that the residents had at their disposal a domestic currency which was freely convertible at a fixed price into another asset acceptable at international payments. So what was the major advantage or the major factor that we need to understand in gold standard is that the residents of a country will automatically convert their cash into gold. Why? Because if the citizens start feeling that tomorrow the value of gold is going to go up, automatically they will convert their currency into gold and hold that gold itself as an international payment procedure. So automatically now what will happen is that the gold value will keep on increasing on the demand, because the standard, the benchmark factor is going to be gold versus any other currency, and automatically people will rush in to convert to gold. They will rush in to buy that gold, and the value of gold will always be kept at a higher standard altogether. Now moving forward, the gold standard also made it possible for each currency to convert others at a fixed price. So keeping gold as a factor, I can go ahead and start looking into the other currencies. So the convertibility factor was given to the other sectors or the other currencies. Exchange rate were determined in terms of gold. Now this is one thing that we have to seriously understand. Why? Because everything is in terms of gold. So that is where the actual gold content really comes into matter. Why? Because where the currency was made of gold, suppose the currency hold factor might be of a great value, there is a very good economy happening altogether, but it is finally the gold rate that is going to be pitted against the currency. So ultimately at the end of the day, gold will hold higher standard, higher value than the currency, than the economy itself. Moving forward, Bretton Woods system, this was the oldest convention system that was held in the year 1944, which was set up by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which re-established the fixed exchange rate system. So this was an international conference which was created only to make understand the importance of fixed exchange rate system in the international currency arena. Next, this was different from international gold standard. So they didn't want the gold standard to be fixed every time. Who didn't want? The IMF and the World Bank did not want that to happen. So what they wanted is that they want the choice of asset in which national currencies could be convertible. They wanted to remove the gold standard and they wanted to give a choice to the country in order to establish their own standards of the exchange rate system. A two-tier system of convertibility was established at the center, which was dollar. So this was the time period that we need to understand that dollar was made as a central currency, the world's most acceptable currency, and keeping dollar as a standard, every other currency would fluctuate or would be converted or would be valued altogether. So the Bretton Woods system was one of the most important thing that created a complete differentiation in terms of valuation, in terms of understanding the foreign exchange market, and from that day onwards dollar became the center of attraction for every other currency in the world to be benchmarked. With this, we come to the conclusion of this chapter 12, Open Economy. I hope and believe that the system and the chapter was very, very interesting, informative and educative for you. This chapter is very, very important from the exam standpoint, also from the concept standpoint. So I would request all of you to pay attention, to put in a little bit of extra effort that can make you to score marks in this particular chapter. Until we meet next time, until then, goodbye and thank you from my side.